What if I told you that one of the deadliest wars of the 19th century, a conflict whose death toll rivals that of World War I, was started by a man who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ? This is the incredible story of a 14-year civil war that claimed an estimated 20 to 30 million lives. It's a war born from famine, ethnic hatred, and a series of bizarre heavenly visions that would cripple a dynasty, devastate a nation, and forever alter the course of Chinese history. This is the story of the Taiping Rebellion, very possibly the deadliest war you've never heard of. So, how could one man's delusions ignite such a massive catastrophe? To get it, you have to understand the pressure cooker that was mid-19th century China. The country, ruled by the Qing Dynasty, was a nation in crisis. First, you had deep ethnic tensions. The Qing rulers weren't Han Chinese, the ethnic majority. They were Manchus, a people from the north who had conquered China 2 centuries earlier. For many Han, especially in the south, the Manchus were nothing more than foreign occupiers, and resentment was always simmering just beneath the surface. The man who would lead this rebellion saw the Manchus as demons, the source of all China's problems. On top of that, there was just crushing social and economic misery. The population had exploded to over 430 million by 1851, but the land and government couldn't keep up. Famines, floods, and other disasters were constant, leaving millions starving. The Qing government, eaten away by corruption, was useless at providing relief. Officials stole tax money to get rich, while ordinary people suffered. And then the foreigners arrived. Western powers, especially Great Britain, were forcing their way into China. The humiliating First Opium War, which ended in 1842, forced China to sign unequal treaties, giving up territory and legalizing the opium trade that was already wrecking Chinese society. The war exposed just how weak the Qing military was. To many, it looked like the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule, was slipping away. The ground was fertile for rebellion. All it needed was a spark, and that spark came from a very, very unlikely source. His name was Hong Xiuquan. He was born into a poor but proud family in southern China, and like many ambitious young men, he had one goal: pass the brutal imperial civil service exams. It was the only real path to a stable career and a way to bring honor and wealth to his family. But Hong failed, not once, but 3 times. After his third failure in 1837, he went home, sick and broken. He fell into a feverish delirium for days, and in that state, he had a series of wild visions. He dreamed he was taken to heaven, where he met a tall, golden-bearded old man in a black robe. This man, his heavenly father, wept over a world overrun by demons. He gave Hong a golden seal and a great sword, and told him to purge the world of evil. Hong also met an elder brother who joined him on this holy mission. The visions were so intense, his family thought he'd lost his mind. Hong himself didn't get what it all meant, and after he recovered, he went back to his life as a village teacher. The dream faded for 6 years. But in 1843, after failing the exam for a 4th and final time, a cousin gave him a Christian pamphlet he'd gotten from a missionary years ago. As Hong read it, everything clicked. The pamphlet contained translated Bible passages, and through that lens, his vision finally made sense. The old man was God the Father. The elder brother was Jesus Christ. And he, Hong Xiuquan, was God's second son, sent to earth on a divine mission. And the demons he had to slay? The Manchu rulers of the Qing Dynasty and the entire Confucian system they represented. Hong baptized himself and began to see himself as a Messiah. He had failed to become a scholar for the emperor, so he would become a king for God. He and his first followers had a blacksmith forge, 2 huge 10-pound demon-slaying swords, and started preaching. Their goal was nothing less than the destruction of the Qing and the creation of a new heavenly kingdom on earth. With this new purpose, Hong headed for the rugged mountains of Guangxi. There, among the poor and marginalized Hakka peasants, his message caught on. he and his friend Feng Yunshan started a new religious group, the Bai Shangdi Hui, or the God Worshippers Society. Their beliefs were a radical mix of Christian ideas, Chinese traditions, and Hong's own visions. They were strictly monotheistic, smashing idols and ancestral tablets. They were also fiercely puritanical: no opium, no alcohol, no gambling. But here's what made them truly revolutionary for 19th century China. They preached absolute equality. All property was held in a common treasury, land was distributed equally, and women were declared equal to men. Women served in the administration and even in their own military units. Practices like foot binding were banned. This vision of a classless, equal society was incredibly appealing to the peasants, miners, and pirates crushed by famine and corruption. Hong's ranks swelled. A small religious sect was quickly becoming a disciplined and fanatical army. By 1850, Hong, now calling himself the Taiping King, had tens of thousands of armed followers. The Qing government, who'd first dismissed them, now saw the threat. They sent troops to crush the God worshippers. After a small battle, Hong and his followers decided the time was now. In late 1850, they rose up in a full-scale rebellion. The war for the Heavenly Kingdom had begun. The Taiping Rebellion tore across southern China with shocking speed. The Taiping soldiers were disciplined and sober, a stark contrast to the corrupt, opium-addicted Qing armies. They marched north, and their numbers exploded as peasants flocked to their cause. They swept right through the fertile Yangtze River Valley, China's great central artery. In 1851, Hong Xiuquan officially proclaimed the Taiping Tianguo, the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. This wasn't just a protest, it was a new dynasty, declaring its intent to rule China. Their military victories were stunning. The rebellion hit its peak on March 19, 1853, when the Taiping army, now over 1 million strong, captured the great southern city of Nanjing. The victory was followed by a horrific massacre. Seeing the Manchus as literal demons, the Taiping forces carried out a brutal slaughter of the city's Manchu population, with estimates claiming that up to 40,000 men, women, and children were killed. Hong renamed the city Tianjing, or Heavenly Capital. From here, he ruled over a vast territory in the heart of China. The rebellion sent shockwaves across the world. Westerners were initially curious, even hopeful, about a supposedly Christian movement. But that optimism died fast when they learned about Hong's theology, especially the part where he claimed to be Jesus' brother. From Tianjing, the Taiping launched expeditions to conquer the rest of China. One army pushed west, scoring victories. Another made a daring push for the Qing capital, Beijing. For a moment, it looked like the Qing Dynasty was finished. The Heavenly Kingdom controlled a third of China's heartland and seemed ready to topple the Manchus for good. The capture of Nanjing was the high point. What followed was over a decade of some of the most brutal warfare the world had ever seen. This was a total war. The Taiping saw the Manchus as demons to be wiped out. The Qing saw the Taiping as heretics to be slaughtered, often taking no prisoners. The scale of the carnage is hard to wrap your head around. The war raged for 14 years across 17 provinces. The final death toll is estimated to be between 20 and 30 million people. To put that in perspective, the Taiping Rebellion's death toll is in the same league as World War I. Most of these deaths weren't even from combat. They were civilians who died from famine, disease, and massacres as both sides burned farmland and destroyed food supplies. Cities that had stood for centuries were turned to rubble. Entire regions were depopulated, with some areas not recovering for 100 years. The fighting was defined by horrific sieges and massacres. When the Taiping took a city, they often executed the Manchu population. When the Qing retook a city, they answered with equally brutal reprisals. After the kingdom fell, Qing forces carried out revenge massacres against the Hakka people. The Taiping's ambitious march on Beijing ultimately failed, thanks to poor planning and a harsh northern winter. Their attempt to take the port city of Shanghai was also pushed back, partly by a mercenary force called the Ever-Victorious Army, led for a time by the British officer Charles Gordon. The war became a grinding, bloody stalemate, bleeding China dry and leaving scars that would last for generations. Despite its explosive start, the Heavenly Kingdom was built on a shaky foundation. Its collapse came not just from the outside, but from a cancer of paranoia and corruption growing within. After setting up his capital, Hong Xiuquan, the Heavenly King, pretty much checked out. He retreated into his palace, spending his time with his large harem and writing religious tracts. He left the actual running of the kingdom to his generals. This soon led to deadly rivalries. The most powerful was Yang Shuqing, the East King. Yang claimed he could channel the voice of God, the Father, a power that let him boss around even Hong himself. As Yang's power grew, so did Hong's paranoia. In 1856, it all exploded in a bloodbath called the Nanjing Incident. Convinced Yang was about to overthrow him, Hong ordered another general to assassinate him. He did, slaughtering Yang and his entire family. Then that general tried to seize power himself, leading to even more purges that killed thousands of the rebellion's best leaders. The Nanjing Incident was a catastrophe. It gutted the Taiping leadership and shattered the movement's unity and morale. The rebellion, once fueled by idealism, had rotted into a paranoid, decadent mess. Meanwhile, the Qing Dynasty was finally getting its act together. Realizing its own armies were failing, the court allowed regional Han Chinese officials to raise new, modern militias. One commander, a staunch Confucian scholar named Zheng Guofan, organized the Qing Army, a disciplined force that became the Taiping's worst enemy. And the Western powers, once neutral, now threw their support behind the Qing. They decided the corrupt but predictable Qing were better business partners than the bizarre, anti-capitalist Taiping. Western governments gave the Qing money, weapons, and military advisors. By 1862, Zheng Guofan's army had completely surrounded the Taiping capital of Nanjing. The siege lasted 2 brutal years. Food ran out, and the city starved. Hong's generals begged him to escape, but he refused, saying God would provide. He told the people to eat wild weeds, calling it manna from heaven. On June 1, 1864, after reportedly eating the weeds himself, Hong Xiuquan died, possibly by suicide. His teenage son was put on the throne, but it was over. A month later, on July 19, 1864, the Xiang army smashed through Nanjing's walls. What followed was an absolute slaughter. Tens of thousands of Taiping followers were killed in the fall of the city, with some estimates reaching as high as 100,000. Many, rather than surrender, gathered their families, set their own homes on fire, and burned themselves alive. The Taiping Rebellion was over. The story of the Taiping Rebellion is a wild reminder that history is filled with epic, world-changing events that most of us have never even heard of. If you find these forgotten histories as fascinating as I do, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to Ancient Vault. We dive into stories like this every week, digging up the past to better understand the present. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, check out our Patreon, linked in the description below. For the Qing Dynasty, winning was a hollow victory. The 14-year war left China shattered. The human cost was astronomical, and the country's most fertile land was destroyed. The rebellion had fatally weakened the Qing government. To defeat the rebels, the court had been forced to give huge military and financial power to regional Han Chinese officials like Zheng Guofan. This shift in power planted the seeds for the warlord era that would tear China apart in the early 20th century. The rebellion also shattered China's old way of life. For 2,000 years, Confucianism had been the bedrock of society. The Taiping, with their radical anti-Confucian ideas, mounted the most serious challenge to that order in centuries. Even though they failed, they proved the Qing Dynasty was not invincible. They inspired a new generation of reformers and revolutionaries. In a strange twist, some research suggests the rebellion's devastation might have had an unexpected long-term effect. In the hardest-hit areas, the massive loss of life may have eventually led to more urbanization and industrialization, nudging China away from a purely agricultural economy. Ultimately, the Taiping Rebellion was a death knell for imperial China. By weakening the Qing and unleashing powerful new ideas, it set the stage for the decades of revolution that would follow. The dynasty would limp on for another 50 years, but it never recovered. This was a bloody dress rehearsal for the final collapse of a system that had ruled China for over 2,000 years. So why is this conflict, one of the deadliest civil wars in human history, so little known in the West? Maybe because it doesn't fit neatly into our own national stories. It was a Chinese catastrophe that played out on the other side of the world. But its legacy is undeniable. It was a war started by a failed scholar's divine vision, a man who believed he was Jesus Christ's younger brother. And in his quest to build a heavenly kingdom, he and his enemies unleashed hell on earth, forever changing the fate of a nation that would go on to shape our 21st century.